All right, welcome to part two of our video series on I guess we're going to call it a DIY dog training or something of the sort. Taking a look at our young student Aries. And probably the first thing you might notice about this is Aries is much bigger than where we left off in our last video. Still very much a puppy, but a big puppy. And this is something that's very typical with dog training and something that I want to make sure that we point out. If you're going through this video series, it's very common to have periods where you get busy or things are happening and maybe you don't get as much training done as you want during a period of time. And that certainly is the case with us. Now, Aries still made progress over the last couple months, but we didn't really have much time to work on this video series. So if you're going through this and you're like, oh man, I got busy, we had kids' activities or just life happening, that's okay. Most well-bred Labradors or well-bred gun dogs are okay um, with picking up where you left off. They're generally pretty forgiving. What's important is that at those beginning stages, we built that relationship through things like the walk and starting some basic obedience and some basic manners, crate training, etc. And you've got a good foundation to work on. So in the second part of the series, what we're going to do is we're going to start to talk about how we build on that. So this is about building some success. Now, one of the things that you're going to see me doing here is I'm trying to fix a little problem that Aries has the tendency to want to put his feet on people. And you'll see me constantly fighting with him because he will do this pretty often. This is a common, probably one of the most common training things we see is keep your feet off of them. And what we do is we simply push the dog away. You can use your knee to break up the target, if you will, of your chest and your torso for him to put his feet on. It's one thing when it's a 3-month-old puppy, but now that you know he's 50, 55 pounds, it's a lot different. But anyway, in this second part, what we're going to do is we're going to start to introduce one of the most important training tools that we're going to use in all of gun dog training, and that is the leash. All right, now I actually have a couple different leashes, but this one that I'm going to use, I want to show you guys this is a homemade, very inexpensive leash. So you can make something like this. This is like a couple dollar spring clip from the hardware store, and a couple dollars in um, paracord, which you can get at any store anywhere. My daughter actually made this for me as a simple clip, and all it has is a little handle on the end, and it is tied to the spring clip. Now, I'm going to do a couple things today. Talk about this leash, and then talk about how we're going to use it with Aries. First off, I like this because it's got a clip, and I can attach it to him and let him drag it around. Now, I like being able to let the dogs drag them around, and here I've got another one that works much the same way. It's a little bit more fancy. This is one I didn't make. This is one I bought that has a clip on the end, and it has a ring right here that we can clip to. The importance of talking about the leash is that this is probably the most widely used tool for controlling your dog. The first thing you want to do with a leash is you want to let your dog get acclimated to having a leash on them. Hopefully, at this point, your dog has been wearing a collar of some sort. We have collars on our dogs most of the time for identification purposes. If someone sees our dog, we want them to make sure that they know that it's our dog and it has our name and phone number on it. It's also helpful for training purposes to have a collar on him. So right now, Aries, here, bud, is got a flat collar and the leash is just strapped to him. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to use the leash to control him, and we're going to do it in a couple of ways. We can have a flat collar or have the leash connected to his flat collar, which just applies a strap to hold him, or we can use the much more popular method that I will be talking about is having it in slip form. So the idea is we want our collar to slip when we pull on it. So the first thing we do is we start with letting the pup drag the leash around. Hey, bud, Aries, come here, so that they get used to it. Do not be surprised if your young dog, young or just inexperienced dog, chews at the leash. Very common to have a dog chew at the leash. If he does, simply pull it away and just tell him no. Most dogs will mess with it at the beginning and then learn to just kind of live with it. So what we want to do is we want to have the leash be something that we can use to change his direction. That's going to end up being an important part of this, um, of helping him move around. Now, I'm doing this little tugging around in here, trying to help him understand that I'm changing his direction by just small, gentle tugs with the leash. What we want to avoid is we want to avoid this constant pressure. Constant pressure is the enemy here. We do not want a tight leash. All right, and we want never to let a dog make forward progress with a tight leash. A tight leash means that the dog understands that he can pull and he can beat the pressure. He can push through the pressure. We don't want them to have that idea. We want him to understand that the collar is going to create, there's going to be a little tugging motion that changes his direction. So just a simple little drill like this to help him understand, hey, there's a leash and you're going to feel a pull on your neck that's going to have you changing your direction. We can also use this to stop direction. A leash is really helpful if you have a dog that likes to play keep away. What you do is when the dog is playing keep away, you simply step on the leash, right? When you step on the leash, the dog's momentum will be stopped and you can bring the dog to you. So the leash is going to be one of our most important tools, and we're going to use it in two ways. Like I said, we'll clip it on flat and give little gentle tugs, and then we're going to start to use it in slip mode, or called slip lead form, whatever you want to call it. And we'll talk more about that when we start teaching the commands. But for today, all I am trying to do is simply change his direction. Notice I am not giving him any commands. I'm not asking him to do anything here. I simply want him to get used to the idea that a leash is going to be pulling on him and he will feel pressure on his neck that will change his direction, that will be some sort of a stimulant that he will need to be able to respond to. So that's the first part of getting building this next stage, is getting your dog comfortable wearing a leash.